If I am paid, I'm not a mentor. Everyone has something to offer. You do not always have to be looking up. Everyone, younger people in different fields, look at everyone as a resource. It is right now a time to really dig in and do some heavy duty research on mentorship because it's the Wild West. I feel like it's the same as when I entered the field of aging and, everybody was like, let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Welcome to Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today's episode is one you won't want to miss. We're diving into a topic that sits at the heart of leadership development, mentorship. While we've discussed mentorship in a previous episode, today we're going further. Who we learn from, how we grow, and how we, in turn, give back to others are critical components of great leadership. To help us understand the science and power of mentorship, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Debbie Heiser to the podcast. Dr. Heiser is an applied developmental psychologist, the founder of the Mentor Project, and the author of the Mentorship Edge. She has spent her career studying and implementing the power of mentorship in leadership and legacy building. Dr. Heiser, welcome to the Science of Leadership.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, before we dive into our topic a little bit, perhaps could you give our listeners a little bit of an insight into your background?
Sure. I'm an applied developmental psychologist, which is different from the psychologist most of us think of when we hear psychologist. Clinical psychologists study the pathology that we all have the potential of experiencing, and a developmental psychologist is looking at everything we should expect in the lifespan. And I focus on midlife and aging. So, all of the stages that we can expect, which are all good, by the way. And so I come from a research background, looking at everything no one wants to have and get, and pivoted to looking at everything we should expect and be excited about.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that it's a little bit more encouraging to think about those things that are more exciting than those that are the things we don't want to end up having. So,
Yeah.
um, well, let's start by defining mentorship. When we talk about mentorship and leadership, what does that mean to you?
So I've really looked at mentorship from the perspective of, where it comes from research and theory. And it really stems from a developmental milestone that we're all built to experience, which is the stage of generativity. And that hits us in midlife. It's been studied for decades. And it's really, if we look at the principles behind it, connecting, giving back are things that make us live longer, physical and emotionally healthier lives. So basically, what we have are five principles that really make up mentorship. First, the person has to feel generative. They have to want to give something. So if I said, "Hey Tom, I'd like to teach you about pickleball," and you were like, "I don't want to learn about pickleball," that isn't going to resonate. That we don't have mentorship just to start off, right? So oftentimes people are paired up with someone and the person isn't giving what somebody wants to receive. So we have to have that match up to begin with. Second is it has to be not an extrinsic, but an intrinsic motivator for the person who's giving and receiving. So if I am paid, I'm not a mentor. I'm a coach. I'm a great leader. I'm an advisor, a sponsor. I'm something else, but not a mentor. And that's not devaluing anything. It's just saying that it's different. So if I were to say to you, "Hey, Tom, would you like to volunteer at a soup kitchen?" And you said, "Yeah, I'd love to. It makes me feel so good to give." And then on your way, I said, "Hey, take a left turn and go to Starbucks and volunteer there." That would not feel the same. And that's often what I see in mentoring relationships is that it's missing the intrinsic motivator. It also needs to be a meaningful connection. So you have to like me and I have to like you. And there has to be something where I'm saying, "I really want Tom to succeed in this. This matters to me because he's carrying something that's important to me that I'm giving." And the person receiving it has to say, "I value my mentor so much. I want to carry this. This is important to me. I want to do what they think is important with this." We also need to trust the person. This is something that often is an issue in the workplace because if I'm an entrepreneur and I say, "Ooh, I'd love to give Tom this information, but I'm afraid he's going to steal my idea and run off and make his own company with this." Or you might say, "Hey, I am not opening up to her. She's going to find out I don't know something, and then I'm going to get a bad performance evaluation, or I'm not going to get promoted because we're all sort of, it's ingrained in us to let people see the best in us, not our vulnerabilities." And finally, there has to be a goal. That could be a one off, or that could be something that's ever changing as we remain with our mentor. So these five components have to be there in order for it to work. It's like baking brownies and you leave the sugar out. It might look like it, but it won't taste like it. And that's really the essence of what mentorship is.
Wow, thanks for really laying that out for us. And certainly I can see your psychology background in that framework, right? Because there's so much about how we're viewing things, how we're viewing ourselves, what we're hoping for in this, what we're hoping to give and receive in it. And this idea of generativity, I think, is also one that is really important, as that's where I have been over the last decade, probably, is in that place, and coming to realize that that was a part of fundamental to what I see now as my purpose in the world. So, which is why I really personally get so much fulfillment from having the opportunity to mentor people. I find it just, really fulfilling and engaging, and it inspires me in what they're doing and so forth. So I really get a lot of it. And then being mentored, in a sense, I get to see that in the people that mentor me. So thanks for, level setting us with that. I mean, you provided a wonderful synopsis of those things that we need for effective mentoring. I think that's really spectacular.
Thank you.
As you think about your experience, was there a particular person perhaps who served as your mentorship role model, or where did you find this passion really for mentoring? Where did that come from?
Well, I was studying, researching everything, like I mentioned, that no one wants to have or get. I was the downer at every cocktail party. People would want to run away from me when I was talking about end of life and all of that. So I happened to go to a dinner of all psychologists and colleagues that were doing research, and I couldn't contain myself with my excitement to share everything I was doing. I had a book out, and this was, decades ago, and I was doing all sorts of things that I was really proud of myself for doing. And I was there thinking, "Ooh, I'm going to pat myself on the back through this dinner, and I'm going to be like the hero of the dinner." And it couldn't have been worse. So I sit down and I get to my turn when I get to say what I'm up to, and it was like crickets in the room. No
Mm.
one was like applauding my stuff that I had been doing. And the person across from me said, "So what do we have to look forward to as we age? You are putting a band-aid on everything no one wants to have or get." And I was like, "Ooh, ouch, that hurts." So, but the person was right. I wasn't looking at everything that we had to look forward to, only a component of things that we might experience. So I had to go back to the drawing board, and when I did that, I wanted to learn for myself, what do I have to look forward to? It was kind of a wake-up call for me. And I went back to the research and the theories that were out there, and there was a ton of it. It just wasn't making it out into the public in the late 90s and the early 2000s. That was still the wild west of aging. And so when I started to look at, Erickson's theories of development and Laura Carstenson's work and this Harvard 75-year study and a whole lot of other people who had been looking at things just quietly. It wasn't really getting out there. I said, "Wow, I need to work on this because people need to know that there's something that they can look forward to, myself included." And that was my pivotal moment. And I started to really look at who are the mentors because at the time, people weren't talking about mentorship at all. I was starting to talk about it. And when people heard about mentorship, they could all imagine themselves being the mentor or the mentee who was saying, "Ooh, I need a mentor, someone who can give me things, pull me up the ladder, get me to where I'm going." But that mentor was a nameless, faceless individual, and no one was identifying who that was. Just go find one and your life will be better. So I wanted to find those nameless, faceless individuals, and I started to research by talking to about 45 people from, four-star general down to grandmas and see what is really the thing that's bringing all of these people to want to give back. And of course, it was generativity. They were all saying, "I need to feel like I matter, like I'm relevant, like I'm useful, that my footprint is deep, that I feel like the world is better because I'm in it." All of these things that make total sense to all of us. So it turns out people were checking all those boxes like we're supposed to. And then by midlife, they were like, "Okay, I don't want to check more boxes unless I know there's going to be one that's going to be the big one that's going to give me the emotional fulfillment." So when I was talking to people, they were also saying, "I don't have access to mentees." So just like we were hearing from potential mentees that they were looking for mentors, mentors couldn't find mentees. And Bill Cheswick, one of the fathers of the firewall, said to me, "I'm going to be retiring from Bell Labs and I'm going to be moving to a farm. I'm not going to have any access to kids. I can't go to a park and say, 'Hey kid, want a mentor?'" This was a time when I was able to say, "Ooh, you know what? Let's see if we can get you into schools and see what happens." Because that's what he wanted. And we started to play around with all of this, but that's how it all got started, was just an anthropological expedition into what mentorship is.
There's so many things there that you said that I just sort of flared in my mind. The first is the power of a single question. You're at this gathering, and somebody engaged enough to ask this powerful question that redirected your career, it seems,
Yeah.
in a very positive trajectory. And then I'm hearing, when we think about this idea of generativity, it's I think it's legacy, right? I'm
Yeah.
wanting to do something that carries a legacy, and you've written about an idea, this breadcrumb legacy.
Well, legacy is huge for us, right? And in terms of how that works for us, we always want to know that we're impacting somebody that we choose and that we get to know about it. So, legacy, we all say, yeah, 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 that's something I'd like, but it feels elusive to most of us. Like, what is my legacy? And most of us can't see inside of ourselves what that big thing is right away. We don't have the movie It's a Wonderful Life to flash before us and show how we've made a difference in our communities. But I'll give you an example of somebody who did something pretty cool. His name is Bob Lefkowitz, and he's the 2012 Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. And he was like, "Gee, how did I become a Nobel Prize winner? I wonder how that happened." And he figured it was probably mentors. What he did was he created what would look like ancestry.com, like
Mhm.
instead of relatives, it was all the mentors in his life. And he was like, "I wonder how many other Nobel Prize winners are in that, you know, legacy tree." So he wrote one up with his mentors, the people who were lateral to him, and the few mentees that he knew of. And he published it in a journal. He went to a conference not long after. And he was at the conference and somebody came up to him and said, "Hey, Bob, I'm 6 degrees Lefkowitz." And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, 5 people have worked between you and me." And so Bob said, "Well, what are you working on?" And the guy started telling him what he was working on. And it was like Bob's words popped out of his mouth. The work that he had started, he could see it in this guy's work. And he said it was so impactful and meaningful to him because he was able to see that's way far beyond who he knew, they were still doing his work. And, so this is something that we all have out there. We just don't always get to see it. So I would say that I would encourage people to think of legacy as a tiny little nugget of something, a little tiny thing that can blossom into a whole changed trajectory for something. And I think it'd be pretty cool to make your own legacy tree. I think Bob, take a Nobel Prize winner to do something amazing with mentorship, like say, hey, create a legacy tree, but it really can help a person to feel like, wow, I really did make impact.
That actually, as you were saying that, it got me thinking about some of my own mentees, and I've had some of them tell me experiences they've had with people they have trained who subsequently will attribute something to them that I, you know, taught them. And so that thread, from multiple generations is really powerful. Like I have a mentee at the Children's Hospital LA, and she shared that sort of circumstance. And when she did, it was just like, wow, maybe I am making making some
Yeah.
impact I didn't realize. So yeah, I think that is highly valuable.
Yeah, to me, realizing that we can all figure out a way to find out what our impact is it was really powerful to me. I felt like that was a mentorship moment for me because I now carry on that information and try to spread it around to others because I thought it was such a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And so small and simple in a way.
Right, right. Often those things in life that carry such huge impact are, in the moment, it seems small and simple.
Yeah,
Kinda like that
exactly.
question at the party that you were at, right?
Right.
I mean, that was a small, simple that person had probably, unless you've gone back and told them, has no idea that they had that
You're
sort
right.
of impact on you, right? And so, yeah, small and simple. Well, let's shift a little bit, here in our conversation now to the idea that's at the heart of your book, the Mentorship Edge. What is the Mentorship Edge? Or maybe I should ask, why is mentorship, so important for us as leaders specifically, giving and receiving?
Because I think it's well, first of all, I think mentorship is incredibly important because we can't do anything alone. There's no one if someone says, "Hey, I did this all by myself," they're wrong. We don't do anything by ourselves. No invention was made just by one person. If you look at the tech revolution, that was not done by one person. The founding of our country was not done by one person. It took experts in a variety of different fields to make it happen. We like to think of things as I did it myself. I'm very independent and I can solve all the problems. And we need to step away from that because it's the wisdom of others or the insights of others that help us to see a new path forward or broaden our path or to make something brand new happen. So I really feel like in many ways, I've been hearing mentorship being talked about from like a corporate standpoint, and it's not correct. It's been put out there as something that has a reward attached to it, whether that's hey, do this and you will be labeled a mentor or a mentee and you can this will be part of your performance evaluation. Are you engaged in this or something like that? And it feels to me sort of exploitive as opposed to to the mentor, not really looking at the generativity that's really the key to all of this. I'm also seeing that people are letting go of a lot of their seniors, and that's burning down libraries. So I wanted to really show how we are our most precious natural resource. And if we tap into each other, we're able to really have an enormous impact. So the book really was there to say what mentorship is, what it isn't, and to define those other things, because to say you're a coach doesn't, I mean, it's not devaluing anything by saying, hey, I am a, this isn't mentorship. I've heard from a lot of leaders who say, well, I'm a leader and a mentor. And I say, well, okay, what do you do? And they mention some of the components from mentorship. And I say, no, no, you're a good leader. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like when I talk to my students and I say, I'm your advisor. I'm paid to help you. I care about you. I want you to succeed. I'm not your mentor right now. I'm paid to be with you. Now, there are plenty of students that I meet with outside of school. They'll come back 2 years later and say, hey, can you help me to get into graduate school? Or whatever the component is that's outside of the classroom, that's where mentorship is. And I think that when we put all of these things together, we don't offer ourselves the opportunity to say, you know what, I could use a coach and a mentor, or I need an advisor and a mentor. I need 10 mentors. To be a good leader, I should be involving these components, and I can be a mentor too if I want. But it allows us to get more good stuff. And the book is really there to show how you can have it all, but we have to be able to define it properly.
So it sounds to me like, from your perspective, it's really mentorship is done with no strings attached, no incentive other than that internal incentive, right? And so, and I will agree with that on FOSS, right? But one question I have as we just looking at, I'm in academics, right? And everything in academics and in other domains in our society at this point, and increasingly so, are transactional, very much transactional,
Mhm.
and you have to specify every bit of time. And so, as somebody who I've run our mentorship and coaching programs for our department, and we have to allocate time, what we would call FTE, right?
Mhm.
Um, to that, would you say that still remains mentoring, even though, I mean, it's on some level, it's a bookkeeping thing, so that basically the university will let us do this, right? Is that still mentoring from your
So
perspective?
here's what I will say. A lot of those are not, and it isn't a bad thing. It might just be something that isn't mentoring, but should be called something else, like advising, that you're in an advisory role. The reason I say that is because a lot of the programs, once it's gamified, which means that it has some kind of an
Mhm.
incentive on it, it removes that, not altruistic, but more of the non-compensated act of giving. Once you have it where you feel like you must do it, it's a burden. It's a burden to the mentor. It's even a burden to the mentee, where they're like, oh, I better come in and say something. Oh, I'm supposed to be working with my mentor. And that's where it can be a little tricky. So, do I think that these are bad? No, but they often don't work the way that they should. And then a person feels a little empty with regard to the mentorship. So, here's how it can work in university settings. And I give an example of this in the book because I've seen it myself. So, the way that a person can be in academics and mentoring is it often goes back and forth. You're not always in your situation where you're a professor. So Joel Weinberger is a professor with graduate students. Oh, he's meeting with his students as an advisor, and one of the students is really interested in his work. When that student ended that portion of the schooling, he said to her, "Hey, would you like me to mentor you in writing a book? You are interested in this. I want to write a book. Let's work on this together." And he mentored her. They co-authored a book. Now that was a student who went from being an advisee to graduating out of that program and then moving to a mentee. Now they're colleagues. So you can have lots of different hats with the same person, and when it shifts through those areas, it has a different feel to it. He felt like I am moving her career forward in a different way than I could have done as her professor, and it ended up moving so that they're now colleagues and they refer to each other and all of those things. So the when you are though, if I feel like I have to advise students, right? I really feel like that's part of my job.
Mhm.
I do it, I enjoy it, I get something out of it, but it feels different than mentoring because when the students come to me later and they say, "Hey, can you help me? I really want to go on to graduate school. I have this one ask, I have a goal here." And I can say, "Yeah, I can help you with that." That's me not as an advisor. They're probably graduated out of college already and they're coming back to me. I'm now in a mentoring role. Can you have both at the same time? Yes. But I would suggest, and I write about this in the book too, engaging more in lateral mentorship where you are not having that expectation. And it can be somebody who's hierarchically higher than the other person, but it's more. a level playing field. And the way it works is like this. You know what? I'll give it to you in a military example. The military is very hierarchical, right? So you
Mhm.
know who's above you, who's below you. There's a lot of rank. The first second of any big crisis, those walls come down and you start getting mentorship from the people to your left and right. The branches start communicating with each other. And then as soon as the crisis is over, those walls go back up and it's hierarchical again. That can happen in academia, that can happen in medicine, those same places, and that's how that mentorship remains organic. Like, you're reaching out to somebody in a crisis, and you're saying, "Oh my gosh, can you give me some guidance here?" And somebody doesn't say, "Hmm, what am I gonna get for that?" They're like, "No, no, no, I'll help you." It becomes it goes to that generative root, and that's where if you can have that generativity component in there, that can make even something that's seems rigid in the way it's presented work. So yours may work like that, may be that way, but I would just suggest to people who are going to be creating mentorship programs to remove the gamification or the if you're looking for actual numbers like a checkbox, because you can still see the output and the growth of something without having those checkboxes. How are the grades? What's the performance? Who's is more research happening? Is more publications happening? Those are the ways that you can look at it and see if it's happening without naming 2 people who may or may not be involved. Plus, it makes a person feel like, "Oh, you know what? I'm being mentored by Tom. I really wanna ask a question of, like, Mary, but I'm gonna feel like I'm making Tom feel bad that he's not my only mentor, that somebody else might be able to give me mentorship."
Thanks for expanding on that. That's really helpful. I will say that in our program, we have both. We have those that are, there for incentive, and we have those that if there was no incentive, they would still be there. So it's split. If you think about the scientific studies that have been done on mentorship, what do studies show that, are the impacts for both mentors and mentees when it comes to mentorship?
You know, it's really interesting because if you look at the mentoring research, it's very small and very disconnected studies. And those are very hard to generalize. And people are generalizing that all the time, which I personally find annoying. But if you do a study of 18 undergrads, that does not really transfer to corporate work. And if you do a survey in a corporate setting, that does not necessarily translate to a nursing program. So what we did was a systematic review within the Mentor Project to look at more than 3,500 studies on mentorship to see what was out there and how that looked. And really, what we're looking at is a generativity component. Those that work really well are ones where the mentor feels invested in the mentee and where the mentee is feeling connected to the mentor and where there are clear goals, where it's really looking at all 5 of those principles. It's really showing that that does come out. So when we're looking across settings, we need to have that so that we don't say, "This is how mentorship looks in whatever setting you're in it." Mentorship is mentorship, whether you're in whatever setting you're in, and so we should really be making sure that we are applying it in that way. The other thing we were able to see is that a lot of people were talking about mentorship in the research, and it really wasn't mentorship. They were using some of the same words, and they were not applying it in the same way. We also saw that people were using the term protege and other things that were we had to determine, does this fit within mentorship or not? So, it is right now a time to really dig in and do some heavy duty research on mentorship because it's the Wild West. I feel like it's the same as when I entered the field of aging and, everybody was like, "Let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks." And that's kinda where we are with mentorship.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's so many studies in the literature that often small, often in specific settings, and you wonder about the validity with regards to
Mhm.
in other sorts of domains. I guess the thing that I've seen the most in studies, at least in more organizational settings, and not necessarily in studies of students or things of that nature, but higher employee retention, stronger leadership
Yeah.
pipelines, increased innovation, those sorts of things. But other things, as you say, are a little bit questionable as far as are they transferable to some other setting. To this end, you're discussing about the need for more research. I actually am framing up a study right now to try to look at mentorship. One thing that we're seeing in academic medicine, at least, is mentees or potential mentees, junior faculty, not engaging in mentorship when it's offered,
Yeah.
which is a really fascinating thing. So trying to figure out what's the driver or what are the drivers behind that. And so that's a study that we're about to launch soon. My
It
colleagues
would
and
be
I.
interesting for you to look at trust with that. Because if a person feels vulnerable, no one likes to feel like they are seen as the person that doesn't know anything. And there are ways that you can look at that and part of that is if you look at the hierarchy within medicine, you can see that people will reach out to people, but it's always the organic way. They'll do a curbside consult. They'll
Mhm.
hit, because you can't be like, "Ooh, I'm gonna go do something in anesthesiology, and I don't know what I'm doing." That wouldn't work well, right? And you don't want to be outed as that person. So the vulnerabilities show themselves when people will say to a lateral colleague or someone in a different department that is higher up. So it's more of like I guess, a lateral kind of upward,
Yeah. Mhm.
motion. They'll look there because they are not then outed in their own department. So that trust component I've heard from people in the medical fields as the key thing that keeps them from signing up to get a mentor where they feel like their vulnerabilities could be exposed.
Yeah, that's a good point, and certainly that's something we'll be exploring. Well, Dr. Heiser, let's make this practical, I think, for our listeners if we can. If you had to put together 3 actionable steps that listeners can take today to start engaging in mentorship, what would those be?
I would say look to your left and look to your right. You're looking at a potential mentor or someone that you can mentor. We are surrounded by people who we overlook as mentors and mentees, and it's that individual who can tell you something that they know that can inspire you to go do something, or that you might be the inspiration for somebody. And so just the 3 steps I would say is look to your left, look to your right. Ask yourself, am I in a position to help that person? Is there something I know that they don't? And the opposite. Can someone help me with something I'm doing? So it's as simple as that because we can get this at work, in our home life. We can move this needle forward in a multitude of directions in our lives just by doing those 3 things.
Yeah, so awareness, openness, curiosity.
Yeah,
Maybe we could
exactly.
boil
Yeah.
down to that. So those are
Better
great.
put than I had it. So yes.
I love those. Well, you articulate. I just how it's stuck in my mind. So, but those are great. So one last question for you. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh, I think that I would have said to myself, "Look around you, everyone has something to offer. You do not always have to be looking up." Everyone younger, people in different fields, look at everyone as a resource.
Yeah, that actually resonates with something General Jim Mattis told me. He said every day's a school day, and he said my teachers have been from the age of basically 19 to 99, essentially. And so, same kind of idea. We can learn from everybody if we're willing to, uh, be aware, be open, and so forth. So, if our listeners want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
They can go to mentorproject.org, and they can also find me. I have my own website, deborahheiser.com, on LinkedIn, and they can read the Mentorship Edge and learn a lot more about me and mentorship.
Dr. Heiser, this has been a great, great conversation. I really appreciate you being on here. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you for joining me on the Science of Leadership today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.